Hello, Michael Nguyen. Welcome to the DoingCXRight show.
Hi, Stacy. It's an honor to be here. I'm a little nervous. You've had some pretty iconic guests on the show. I'm just a huge fan. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, for those listening and not watching on YouTube, I have a big smile on my face. So thank you for that warm hello. And I'm so glad to have you on the show because it's not just about where you work and where you've worked, but you really have such deep knowledge on doing CX right. And I want to make this show really practical and actionable for listeners to change their mindsets because so many people are saying to me, Stacy, I don't have time for customer service. I don't have time to worry about the experience. We just need to get the revenue. We need to get our operations in order and. So we're going to dive into that with a lot of your knowledge. But before we do, can you give a short synopsis of who are you? Where do you work? What have you done that speaks to your CX knowledge?
Yeah, I consider myself kind of a lifetime student of customer experience and just kind of like human-centered design and human-centered thinking. I've spent the last 10 years building voice of customer programs for kind of early stage startups and to the point where they go public. First at Asana, was early employee there, around 70 people, kind of built out the voice of customer program there, left shortly after they went public to join Figma and to do it again in a totally different way, which was more from the infrastructure and kind of systems side and kind of seeing Figma deploy a kind of customer intelligence platform from 300 employees up to like 1,500, and they've recently went public. And then now I lead customer intelligence at Enterpret. So it's kind of the dream job. It was like something I was doing within these companies for so long, and then to now go and work with other, amazing customer-centric companies and product builders and kind of help shape a platform and how we can help companies do this in the age of AI.
Yeah, definitely in the age of AI. And you said customer intelligence. There's some people listening right now that might not know what does that actually mean. It sounds like a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the challenges. Like even people have so many different definitions of like customer experience or voice of customer. Mm-hmm. And I think the main point here is like there was a traditional way of doing voice of customer, which is your, sophisticated surveying and journey mapping and orchestration. And that was great, but you still had this fundamental challenge of like data being siloed and intelligence being fragmented. And you had different dashboards from different teams. And, you typically were just focused on, at the end of the day, revenue. Like you said, it's like, oh, I don't have time to focus on all these other dashboards. Like I'm looking at my North Star metric or my revenue metric. And so the world of customer intelligence now is less about just like collecting survey and like analyzing it in silos. It's how do you unify all of that disparate feedback, all of that unstructured data, and weave it into your business context. So who's the feedback coming from? What account, how much did they spend? What was their last purchase? And so when you weave all of that together into a unified platform, you can start kind of approaching this doing CX right in a totally different way, in a way that doesn't have to sacrifice that time, right? I think there's a stat that said like 80% of CX folks spend 80% of their time like cleaning and organizing data and only 20% of it analyzing it. And that adds up to 100. Like what percent of the time are they spending influencing decisions or driving the roadmap or driving focus on specific areas to improve the customer experience? So I think it's a new time where AI can really help give people time back to focus on what matters.
So doing CX right and intelligence, how does it relate to turning customer painful complaints? Because God knows there's so many of complaints in this chaotic world. People care about profitable growth opportunities. What do you say to those people that have these customer painful complaints?
I think it's such a funny question because to me, it's such an obvious one. It's like if someone's complaining, like their needs aren't being met. And they're either already giving you money and their needs aren't being met, or they want to give you money and you're not meeting their needs. And so you can be all high and mighty and be like, no, we know better. Like they would just ask for a faster horse. Like sometimes they just want a faster horse. And there's a lot of money to be made by satisfying and understanding and acting on your customers' needs that aren't being met. And if you do that well, then you earn the right and the trust to innovate and to be creative and to kind of think outside the box. But I think in today's world, like if you're not understanding and meeting customer needs on a consistent basis, like you're not going to be around much longer.
So the complaints, I hear that as real pain. I hear that as frustration. I hear that as what I call these emotional lows.
Yeah.
And many companies are not paying attention to that. They say emotions don't belong in business. What's your view on that?
I don't think businesses are purposely ignoring or trying to disregard customer complaints. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I don't think leaders up there like, no, ignore the customer, like go drive revenue. I think it goes back to what you said earlier, which is like, it always felt like so much work to go and dive deep, understand, put that data together in a way that leadership will understand and they'll actually do something about it without the data being wrong and me looking stupid. At the end of the day, it comes down to like, can we actually organize our information in a way to influence decision making? And I think that even when good companies and well-intended companies try to do that, it just becomes so challenging at scale. So I don't think it's like purposely they're doing it on like ignoring customer complaints. I do think the best companies are able to overcome that trade-off of time and energy and resources. But I think now with AI, like there's no more excuse that only the big companies or only the fully funded companies can do it.
So you just said scaling. Let's go into that for a moment because you have research that reveals that as companies grow, they're losing the closeness and connection with customers that fueled their success. And I want to hear more from your view about this paradox and why does this loss of connection create such a big CX accountability gap across companies?
Yeah. First I'll caveat by saying like I come from kind of the startup world. So, when you're like a startup and you have limited funds and you're like, we need to find product market fit, right? Everyone on the team is like talking to customers every day. Like, hey, what do you think of this? Like, what if we built this? Or what do you think of this feature? Or like, how upset would you be if you could no longer use this? And I think the thing that makes them successful to find product market fit and to grow and scale and then start getting funding and raising money and all of that stuff, that same success is what kind of creates the scaling paradox. So now you have, let's say you have 20 employees. Now you have 100 or 500. And so the time you used to spend talking to customers on a daily basis, texting them, messaging them on Slack, you're now building your team. You're like, oh, I got to build a sales org. I got to build a marketing org. I got to build a research team. I got to build a support team, a CX team. And you spend all this time company building and you kind of can disregard the like, oh, wow, I used to talk to customers a lot more often. But they rely on that intuition they've had for years from building the company from the ground up. Then they can also rationalize, right? Like, oh, well, we have a CX insights team now, or we hired a research team, or we have a data scientist now. And it's their job to be customer-centric, or it's their job to bring the insights. And so I don't know why this happens, but then leaders get comfortable and they kind of sit back and they can sit in these meetings where they're just looking at dashboards and charts, and that's their new way of connecting with customers. And so it's this really weird paradox where your decision makers drift further away from having that direct connection from customers. So now their intuition's outdated, or it's over reliant on stale dashboards or just kind of like abstractions of customer emotion and customer pain. And then your frontline teams who talk to customers all the time, they drift down in the kind of ability to influence. So now your customer experts are like these unheard experts throughout your organization. And they're just like churning out reports, wondering if anyone does anything with them. And then your decision makers are like making decisions based off of, highest paid person in the room or loudest voice in the room, all of these kind of suboptimal ways to be making decisions. And for whatever reason, like that's been okay in how companies grow.
Yeah, I think that small companies, but even big, are grappling with this alignment, and I think there's too much data. I think that companies are investing in too many platforms with the growth of AI. And so more isn't always more.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen this, right? I think the way I describe it is like when you're really immature, you have these frontline teams, they bring all this data. And the goal of these meetings is like awareness. Like, hey, did you know these are the top 10 things that customers are struggling with? And you do it like quarterly. And for some odd reason, you expect to be able to get everyone to be aware, align, and accountable for understanding and taking action on those customer needs or customer complaints. And you're expected to kind of like do all that in 1 hour meeting once a quarter. Right. And so if you can kind of parse that up and say, actually, we have more real-time ways to drive awareness of what customers are complaining about or what customers are asking for, then you can have meetings that are more focused on alignment and accountability. So it's like you go to the meeting, you're like, hey, this is less about, I'm not going to teach you something new or blow your mind of something that you haven't heard before because you've been talking to customers or you've been getting the feeds or whatever. This is really around, are we fully aligned that these are the top 10 things that are going unaddressed? And are we okay not solving those this quarter? And then who's accountable for that?
Yeah, the who is really important. Centralization and aggregating that customer feedback, I find some companies do it really well, some don't. So, Michael, you've worked with a lot of different companies and you've seen what great looks like. I want to dig deeper into what we're talking about and make it real for the listener. So Canva, for example, a fabulous brand. Yes. Yeah. But let's talk about it. Why are they so amazing? What are they doing right and transforming and being able to scale, knowing the customer needs and feedback?
Yeah, it's a classic example of setting the tone at the top. So Melanie, the co-founder and CEO, like one of the most impressive founders and leaders in tech, in my humble opinion, she has a board level metric of how many loops did we close with our customers. So Jesse, our champion at Canva, he literally has a team called like the Close the Loop team. And their whole operation is around collecting feedback, understanding it, acting on it, and then closing the loop with every single one of those folks. They're doing it at 250 million active users, right? So like you think about doing it at scale, these are the companies that are really pushing and pioneering forward. And everyone you talk to, they're like, oh, we're not great at it. We're not great at it, but like we're learning and we're getting better. And I think that's a perfect example of like, if you really commit to it and you leverage technology, like some of these things that weren't really practical in the past are actually now kind of key differentiators in how you build loyalty and trust across your community of customers.
But someone listening saying, okay, but how do I do that? What is Canva? I mean, you can't give away their secret sauce, but what are they doing? What can a company leader listening say? How can I get the growth that Canva has, even if I'm in a different industry?
Yeah, I'd say there's two things. So I think one, as a leader, just like letting go of this like perfect ROI of customer centricity. Like, are you really arguing the fact that like treating your customers well and making them feel heard and understood is like good for business? Like, I don't feel like we're in a world where that is too controversial anymore. And so like this Canva example of like, they have a closed, it's a vanity metric if you think about it. How many loops did you close with customers? There's no revenue number tied to that. There's no NPS. There's no CSAT tied to that, right?
Yeah.
But it's a rally cry for the organization like this matters. And we're going to invest in systems. We're going to invest in people. We're going to invest in, cutting edge AI to see if we can do this better and do it at scale. And I think that's like a powerful lesson of just like, hey leaders, like, let's chill out a little bit on the metrics and the ROI talk. And let's let our customer champions internally really start innovating and be able to kind of move in that direction, even if there is no perfect ROI answer or calculator. So I think that's one. The second one is, when you're able to unify all of this information into a single place, then all of these things now become very practical and very easy to do. And it does take time. It does take energy. I'm not saying it's easy, but you can work towards it. Like it didn't start out like this. So for them to kind of go along this journey and over several years and try different tools, homegrown and off the shelf, really kind of build out that infrastructure and think about customer insights as infrastructure, not as like a process or not as a program, I think is kind of where the future's going. I mean, you talk about this, right? There's the heart and there's the systems and just like there's a balance of both.
So where does AI come into this?
AI is turning like qualitative data, like this, giving it this huge uprising. We went through like BI and big data and quant and data science, like that was everything. But now with generative AI and these large language models, like qualitative data is so rich and so much more easy to kind of operationalize as context. And so now you can arm your entire company with that information. And so, at a day-to-day level, people can make better decisions. At a prioritization level, people can make better decisions. At a leadership level, people can make better decisions. So I think it's just balancing out kind of the type of data and the type of insights that your organization has to kind of fuel their decision-making.
Again, someone's listening and says, I'm in. I want to use AI to help me understand my customer more. I want to create metrics like Canva that is really driving a culture of customer centricity beyond just those hard ROI numbers. What else can they go do? Because they want to scale, but they're stuck. What have you seen other customers, other clients, other businesses, even where you've worked before?
Yeah, I think there's kind of three key tactics. We talked a lot about the first one, which is like unify all of your customer intelligence into one place. Let it be woven in together with your business context so that you know where the feedback's coming from and you no longer have these like huge blind spots of like, oh, this is just one person saying that. This is, you have kind of that connection. The second one is like, we need to stop siloing not just the data, but also like the insights. So when I was at Asana, it was easy for me to feel comfortable representing the customer because I'd spent, 4 years as a customer success manager. I've worked with so many customers and had that intuition. But when I went to Figma, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep all of that product knowledge, customer intuition across 7 different products in my brain. And that company was so customer centric. Like, I'm not going to tell the VP of product anything they don't know already because they're talking to customers every day.
Right.
And so it was really around how do we build systems and how do we build infrastructure to scale those insights versus how do we build expertise within a given team or a given person. I think just like activating insights and letting them flow into where decisions are made or where products are built or where, policies can get updated and made, regardless of your role and your title. I think that's another thing. It's just like people call it democratization of data, et cetera. But really integrating insights into where decisions are made and where work is happening. That goes back to that trade-off. If it's so hard to go find customer feedback, people are going to not take the time to do it. And then they'll say, oh, I don't have time. I got to work on my core projects or I got a performance review or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the last one is bringing those rituals back to where leadership has that direct connection. So if you have a foundation where, your customer intelligence is sound and this infrastructure is there, it's being kind of integrated and it's real time into everyone. Now your leadership team can justify spending a week in the field or having customers come to an all hands meeting or having a customer advisory board. And those things that didn't scale in the past don't need to because you have everything else scaling up. That now these rituals are really around that deep connection and that emotional connection to the people that you're building a whole business to serve. And I just don't think there's a replacement to that. Seeing a customer struggle with your product or service or seeing them frustrated. Once you see that, it's very hard to ignore. And I think if you can kind of have that ritual in addition to these systematic ways of doing it, then you can really start kind of building towards that doing it at scale.
I also see a very important practice needed where companies are coming together, all different leaders from around the business.
Yeah.
And they're literally mapping out how the customer learns, buy, get, use, pay, get help.
Yeah.
that journey, and overlay the insights
Yep.
at every micro moment.
Yep.
Because without that, you're flying blind,
Yep.
number one. And number two, every team doesn't understand where the connection or disconnect happens in their role. Tell me a little bit about what you've seen in the way of teams working well like that, journey mapping together with that data. Is that familiar to you?
Yeah. When I was at Figma, I was on the research team. So researchers love their journey maps and mental models and service blueprints, and I do as well. I think the powerful thing is that shared mental model of a journey map or stages to contextualize customer pain points or frustrations is really becomes the blueprint for how to think about all of these customer complaints and issues. So we actually do this workshop with our customers where we will sit down and we'll kind of map out, based on your business model, what are your company's like North Star metrics? And then we'll map that to, okay, what are the customer segments that break down for you to reach that North Star metric? Then we map that to, okay, what's your feedback ecosystem so that you know the health of those customer segments and those customer experiences tied to that metric, right? And this is really cool exercise because you're like, I didn't know we had that data. Oh, we have support tickets. Yeah, we have social, we have surveys, we have employee feedback, we have product reviews, et cetera. And then now you can stitch all of that context together. So you can say, okay, give me the top complaints from customers that are in the last month's like activation flow versus the ones that made it past that flow. And like, what's the delta between what they're complaining about or what they're like excited about? And I think if you think about how long that would take you to do in the past, you'd be like, oh, we need to hire a researcher, we need to like spin up a project, and maybe in 3 months they'll come back with something insightful or not. Now you can do that in real time. So to be able to like slice and dice the data the way you want to, and then quickly get what you need and then start acting towards a better solution versus just like analysis paralysis.
Would you agree that this applies to small companies as well as big companies and digital as well as retail offline?
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's interesting. I've been talking to a lot of like AI startups and they're growing like crazy. Like it's just like unheard of revenue growth. Yet they're all paranoid. They're like, yeah, we have like 300 million AR, but we don't know what's actually sticky. And it's like, okay, well, how are you learning from your feedback? How are you learning from your customers? And like, are you doing that? Are you doing it at the same speed and scale in which you're building new products? And the answer is usually no. So I'd say like smaller companies, this is the best time to invest in your customer intelligence like infrastructure because it gets so painful to do once you get big. It's like having a 10-acre lot and being like, oh, I'm not going to mow the lawn or do anything for 10 years. And then, oh, I'll figure it out later. So I think that's really hard to do as you get bigger. It's better to do when you're small. With digital businesses, I think it's easier to make the case because you're like, every customer that stays and pays and retain hits the bottom line. Yeah. In retail, there's a little bit of a distance, like, oh, how much are they buying or how often are they buying? So it's a little harder to make the case, but I think it's the fundamentals and the principles are still sound.
Yeah. Well, rapid fire questions here because we're coming down to the end. It goes way too fast.
I know, it's way too fast.
So leadership. Best leadership advice that you've personally been given or received?
A colleague and good friend gave me this advice. He said, if you practice the same level of empathy for your colleagues as you do for customers, you'd be much more effective.
Yeah.
And I think that was just younger me being stubborn. Like, we need to do what's best for the customer. Why don't people get it? I think kind of having that same level of empathy of like, okay, well, here's what their team does, here's what their metrics are, and here's why that's hard. I've been able to build better alliances and partnerships as I've matured.
And you personally, again, 20-year-old self, if you could go back in time and give advice to younger Michael, 20-year-old Michael, what would you say?
This has been top of mind. I have a 3.5-year-old, so I've been thinking about this a lot. I think I would say constantly feed your curiosity. I found that to be kind of my source of strength and inspiration and drive. And then I would say practice good habits early. Even the simplest ones. Just get in good routines and habits and make that kind of core to who you are.
Yeah. Atomic Habits is very popular of a book for a reason.
Life-changing book for sure. I was looking at your previous episodes and this was my fun fact. You didn't ask me my fun fact question, but one of your guests wrote a book that changed my life.
Ooh.
And there were
that?
There were several guests that wrote books that were very compelling, but one of them literally changed my approach to work, and it was Dan Pink's book, Drive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was a great episode, and I got to check out his new book.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you for sharing that very much. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And I will include where to find you and the company and all your socials in the show notes. So thank you again for your time and wisdom. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Stacy. It's been an honor.
Thank you.